It's Ben here, and here in this video we're going to have a look at how we edit the type, color, size and alignment. So a very basic type tutorial. And before we get started, a big thank you to FX Factory for sponsoring this video. So we're going to come up to the top left here into our title and generators panel. And if we scroll all the way to the top, you'll see your titles where we have different types of custom titles, animated titles we can use. We're going to jump into the bumper and opener titles where we're going to find the basic title. So we'll grab this and drag it down to the timeline. And you can stretch this out like any clip. And we'll just type in some text into our title here. And once you type that in, we are going to highlight it and pick from the 2D styles, just the bold style that we have. So the first thing we can do here is edit the type color. So if we scroll down all the way to the bottom, you can see we have our face option here, and this is where we find that type color. So at the moment, we're set to white. If we show that, then we can select from this drop-down menu any color that we want, or if we have specific colors that we want to type in, then we can click on the color box here, just scroll this up a little bit more, and when we click, we can come to different color pickers where we can choose colors in different ways. So the most common ones you'll need are the color sliders. So here we have our hue, saturation and brightness sliders. This is useful if you want to keep the green hue the same but make it darker or lighter. And then we have, if we grab this drop down menu, the RGB sliders, which will also be useful if you want to type in a specific RGB value. So for some organizations you have a design standard, or if you're designing stuff yourself, then you'll want to kind of figure out some consistency in the colors that you're using. So here we'll grab this orange and we can close this window. And so now you can see we can also change here the opacity and blur of that type as well. If we scroll up here, you can see we can now change the size. So you can see our size is listed under the basic parameters. We can increase and decrease the size or set it to a specific value that we want. The next piece is the alignment, and this is useful if you want to think about where your type is going to align. So at the moment when I drag my type around, it's aligning to the center, and if I keep typing, it's going to keep aligning to that central point, so my central alignment. If I want this to spread out to the right, we'll just drop the size of this down a bit. So if I want to position this at the top left, maybe I have different parts to my video, so this could be part 1, classroom learning, and essentially when we add or edit parts of this, we don't want it to jump back to the middle, we want it to align to that top left point. So when I extend this line, if we have it aligned to the center, you can see it's going to stretch out to the left there. So it's not going to work in the way that we want it to work, whereas if we have it aligned to the left, then we can position that type. So if we just use an example here, I'm going to highlight part 1 here and just scroll down to the bottom. We'll edit the face color, we'll make this white, and then we'll duplicate this. So now if we use for this second clip, sorry, just jumping around a little bit here, we'll have classroom tools, just as an example. We might have a transition between those two bits of type. I just use Command and T. So now our alignment works nicely between those two. Actually, for a transition like this, if we delete this, I would often use the position tool just to make a gap between that so that we can transition and then fade back in. With the gap, it works nicely rather than fading directly between the two pieces of type. We're fading to a gap and then up again. So all I've done there is used the position tool so that when I'm adjusting these, it's actually pulling them apart, whereas if I use the standard selection tool, it will not make a gap there. So we can use the position tool in a nice neat way here to make a gap, keep all our type on one connected storyline, and then use Command and T, and that will make that transition between both of them. So let's just finish this off. We will add a new transition at the beginning and end of these. Again, just Command and T to add that default transition. And you can see, we'll just go back to our selection tool and then shorten this. And you can see this will play back quite nicely. Part 1, classroom learning, plays through, fades out. We have our nice little gap. And then into part 2, classroom tools, and fades out again. So a couple of things there. When we were changing the color of this first piece of type, we had to highlight it so we can have those two bits of color there. And then for the second area of type, again, we just set up that color before we duplicated it, which I did by holding down the Option key and then dragging across to duplicate that layer of type. So we could have part 3, assessment tools. Okay, and again, we can drag this into there, use the position tool again, and fade in and out of that. And you can see I've actually caught the white there rather than the orange. So what I'll do sometimes with this when it happens is I will type in where it is actually orange, so after the T, and then delete backwards. You might find you need to do that, otherwise it's catching that white piece of the text at the beginning there. So again, some nice neat tools for aligning and changing the color and size of your type within Final Cut Pro. Hope this is a nice neat little intro and example for you. If you do have any questions, then please leave a comment below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next video.